Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, we're nearing the end of the month, so I wanted to do a TBR as well as a wrap up for what I read in May, and also a channel update, as I'm probably going to be posting a little less than usual in the coming month, just because of an important life event. So it's a channel update in addition to all of that, and I'll get to that when we get to the TBR. So so what did I read in May? What do I intend to read in June? In May, I didn't read as much because of a life event, and in June, I won't read as much because of a life event. It seems like I'm not going to be posting again. Not going to be posting as much, but I'm still very much interested in reading and talking about the books in my life. And I read some quality things in May, like whether it be Good Talk or even the Nightfall Saga. I'm very happy to have gotten to that stuff, and I do want to explore more of those kind of things in the future. So, without further ado, let's get to the wrap up, and then we'll move on to the TBR. So, here we go. As for the wrap up in May, what did I read? Well, one of the first things I wrote was Nightfall, which is from a variety of authors who I will not list at this point in time. But the part one of the Nightfall saga was about Batman getting broken by Bane, and then John Paul Valley, who was known as Azrael at the time, filling in for Batman and eventually defeating Bane. And so that's where the story ends at that point. And then it continues in the part 2 and part 3, and I think even part 4. I'm wondering where the story goes from there, since it appears that Bane has already been defeated. But I am definitely willing to check out those different parts, because Volume 1 was amazing. It was, as I said, pure, uncut, violence. Bane wanted Batman dead. And Batman wanted to stop Bane, but when it proved that Bruce Wayne was not enough, and that John Paul Valley had to be, called into the thing, John Paul Valley saw Bane as some sort of existential threat to the Batman mantle, which he probably thought was his instead of Bruce's. And so there's probably going to be a conflict about that down the road, but I really like how that John Paul takes such an offense to it that he thinks that the only way to go about things is to probably kill Bane and his henchmen. And so he ended up not doing that, but it led to a pretty amazing fight in the comic book panels. And it's comic books can be just as awesome as movies sometimes, in other forms of media, which I really enjoyed. I really got an amazing action-packed adventure out of the Volume 1 of Nightfall. I would like to see Volume 1 eventually translated to the big screen or even the small screen. I want to see Batman and Bane duke it out in a pretty devastating fight in a way that we didn't get with Christopher Nolan's adaptation, and we definitely didn't get with the 90s Batman adaptation. So really good, and I definitely recommend if you want to check out some comics, perhaps check out the Nightfall saga. I also did a booktube challenge with Lucas from The Bits of Lit. We read On Stranger Tides, and we both agreed that the first half of the book is pretty exciting, very thrilling adventure. The protagonist isn't exactly the most heroic or that. He's kind of a nerd, but he's passable as a hero. But in the second half, the story takes a lot of weird and unsatisfactory turns, particularly focusing on the difference between male and female magic, which isn't it isn't given enough of an explanation, and there's a whole bunch of plot holes with the idea of male and female magic. Specifically, how does it work for Blackbeard if he's been married multiple times? how is he still accumulating that magic? Is it just something that happens? You can just take someone's magic, or like if you're getting married, why does it need to be an official marriage or something? There's a lot of questions that it raises that Lucas over at the Bits of Lit gladly pointed out in all the confusion. And so this story has such potential, but it just lands on a big old wet thud, and it leaves a lot to be desired. So maybe I'll check out some more of Tim Powers' other work, but based on Stranger Tides, I don't really have the highest of hopes for what he's been writing. I also read Good Talk by Mira Jacob. It was very informative about the Indian American experience in the United States in terms of Indian from India. Is what I'm talking about there. A very interesting perspective on how difficult it is to talk about racism and the institutional racism that exists in society with your young child, because how much do you tell them? You want them to have a very positive view of their own future, and you don't want to depress them with the facts. And so how do you tell them that America is kind of a very racist place while treating them like an adult, or like treating them as though they matter, but not telling them everything? And if you don't tell them everything, is that irresponsible? Maybe there was a lot to parse through with that story, and it's definitely worth checking out. It was a graphic novel memoir, which I've never read before, and I definitely recommend that you go find, because it's pretty thrilling. That was it for the books that I read. In terms of short stories, I read Vox Clementis and Deserto by Curtis Sittenfeld. It was about a young woman who goes through a pretty transformative experience in her early years as a college student, becomes obsessed with a person because of what they represent. And I thought it was pretty interesting, pretty good short story. Maybe the least interesting of all the ones that I read for this month, but it was still pretty good, and I would recommend that you check it out. I also read A Perfect Day for Banana Fish by J.D. Salinger. I thought it was very sad, compelling, but incredibly sad, especially with its ending. And because of its ending, because of the various aspects of the story, I did find it to be pretty confusing and hard to understand. Someone over at the Codex Cantina, they said, "Oh yeah, it was pretty confusing," and they also mentioned how that was explored in either different Salinger stories and different adaptations of Salinger stories, so different perspectives focused on there. I would still say it's pretty good, but if I have to read the other short stories by Salinger to understand this one, it kind of doesn't do its job, in my opinion. So a little bit to be desired, but Salinger is still a good writer, in my opinion, and there's a reason why we talk about him, even though a lot of people say his work is overrated or irresponsible in some way. So definitely worth checking out. I also read Glory by Leslie Nanika Arima, a fabulous short story about basically lying to the gods, so to speak, and so you can get what you want out of life after going through a bit of a misfortune, based on not only your run of bad luck, but also the bad decisions that you personally have been making in life. I really loved Leslie's writing in that story, and the ultimate question that she leaves us with, which is, does Glory, the character of Glory, does she choose to marry the man who proposes to her at the end of the story, or does she say no? And does that represent growth on her part? She leaves it completely up to you, and I like that aspect about the story. I also read The Funeral Bill by Jason DeYoung. I thought it was grotesque and sad and gothic and and a very hideous story about a very hideous landlord who, is kind of obsessed with death and refuses to be nice at all, and is near the end of his life, so he's reflecting on all this and kind of realizing that he did not spend his life too well. I noted in my video that Jason DeYoung managed to capture the style of Poe in the story, and I still feel that way. And I definitely think it's worth reading because of that atmosphere that he manages to capture. So be sure to check that out if you get the chance. And then I also talked about one poem I would have read more, but as it turns out, I quit my job during the course of this month, and because I've been working graveyard shifts for the past a year and a half, I just decided, to take some time off from really forcing myself to read things. So that's the important one of the important life events that happened that caused me to change my reading habits. But I did read Sleeping on a Waterbed, which I thought was a pretty fun poem, pretty silly poem, maybe not as deep and complex as the other poems that I've read for Poetry Thursday, but it still captured my attention, and so I think it's worth checking out. Go check my Poetry Thursday video for that video. And now we move on to the TBR for June. What do I plan on reading for June? As I noted before, I do have a big life event coming up, and that is that I managed to get a job in California. I got a university job, which is what I've been working for since I managed to get my master's degree, and so at the very beginning of June, I will be moving to California. And so I'm uprooting my entire life in Washington, and Mr. Nothing is going down to California, which according to various musics, California knows how to party, according to Tupac and Dr. Dre. So a really big life event, and because of that, I'm not able to read as much as I have been reading in the past, and just because I'm going from a point where I was reading during the graveyard shift because I had a lot of spare time to a point where I'm working a 9 to 5 again. I might be talking about fewer books, just because I might not have as much time during the evening hours. But I'm still very thrilled about this entire move, and I still want to read, so I'm going to try to make an effort to find books and to read as much as I can, and to just be able to talk about whatever it is that's in my life at that moment, or what particularly draws my eye. So with June, I do have some books scheduled. Because of that, I'm part of that whole book club that I've been talking about. We are going to read Hood Feminism for this month by Mickey Kendall. It's a book about, feminism and black communities. At least I think it's about that, as was described to me. So I'll be talking about that at some point during the month. I have to ship my camera and my microphone, so who knows when that'll arrive and I'll be able to start making videos. But I'll probably read Hood Feminism on the plane ride over to California. And I also want to read another book because I don't want it to just be one book for this month, for June. So I'm going to read something that I've read in the past, but I haven't really talked about on this channel, and that's Flowers for Algernon. So be on the lookout for that sometime in the month of June. I do plan on reading short stories because they are short stories. They're easier to talk about, easier to make videos about. And so as for, what I intend to read for the month of June, the first one that's going to come up, I think, on June 1st is The Lie by Peter Brown. Don't know what it's about, but looking forward to reading it. The city where I'm going to be living apparently has multiple libraries, which is always nice, and so I'll be able to, pull from a new pool of short story collections, because the library where I was at, I was starting to get to a point where I had read through all of the short story collections that they had at the library. So I was having to resort to finding things online, and that's always a bit of a challenge because sometimes it's really hard to find short story collections, in my opinion, unless they're like the best American short stories. And I don't want to read that. I want to read it directly from an author or something like that. But that's my own problem. So very lucky in that the city where I'm moving to is getting or has multiple libraries, multiple places to pull books from, and that should be tons of fun. And then I'll also try to read some poetry next month and talk about it on Poetry Thursday. That's not a guarantee though, but let's see what we can do. And that's what I have planned for the month of June. Very excited for the move that's going to happen. Very excited for the new reading opportunities that I might have. Kind of sad that I might be talking about fewer books, but that's the way things go. I'm still fully committed to this channel because, being able to talk to people about books and being able to have discussions about books has been a great change in my life over the past year. And so I want to continue with that. I want to continue talking about books and saying things that make people angry about books, such as the case when, last year I talked about House of Leaves, and that made Noah over at Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse very angry when I talked about, how maybe I didn't like it as much. So, not angry, maybe just a little bit frustrated. But yep, so that's what I have planned. If you have anything to comment about my big old life event, or the books that I read in May, or what I plan to read in June, or you want to suggest something that I haven't checked out yet, feel free to do so in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion about this. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this channel and the books that I'm talking about. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and bookish travels. Farewell.